There is a particular kind of loneliness that belongs exclusively to survivors. Not grief, exactly. Grief is something you share with other people who loved the same person you lost. Survivor's loneliness is different. It's the specific silence of being the only one in the room who remembers what a person's laugh sounded like, the only one who knows how your father took his coffee, or the specific way your little sister mispronounced spaghetti until she was 7. When everyone else who held those memories dies at the same time, you become the last library, and libraries with only one visitor get very quiet. I was 23 when my family died. My father, Richard, my mother, Carol, my sister, Becca, who was 19 and had just finished her first year of college and was home for the summer and had opinions about everything, and I mean everything, and who I argued with constantly in the specific, aggressive way that only masks deep affection. They died on Route 9 in central New Jersey on a Thursday night in August when a driver named Gerald Potts ran a red light at 62 miles per hour and hit the passenger side of my father's sedan. My father and sister died at the scene. My mother died in the hospital 4 hours later. I was in the back seat behind my father and survived with a broken collarbone, 4 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a head laceration that required 31 stitches. Gerald Potts was drunk. His blood alcohol level was 0.19. He survived with a broken arm. He served 4 years of a 7-year sentence. I have not said his name out loud since the sentencing hearing, and I will not say it again in this account. The years after are not what this story is about, but I'll give you the shape of them because context matters. I finished my degree. I moved to Philadelphia because I couldn't stay in New Jersey, couldn't drive down roads that had no reason to be ordinary anymore. I got a job in logistics management that was not what I'd imagined for myself, but was stable and absorbing in a way that helped. I went to therapy, good therapy, with a woman named Dr. Anita Reyes who specialized in traumatic loss, and who I credit, without exaggeration, with the fact that I am a functional person today. I built a life, slowly, the way you assemble furniture without instructions, a lot of wrong turns, some pieces that don't seem to fit until suddenly they do. I dated occasionally, made friends carefully, in the way that people with heavy histories tend to, testing the water slowly, keeping the deepest parts of myself in reserve until I was sure someone could handle the weight. Most people can't, not really. Not the particular weight of being 23 and the last one standing. I was not unhappy. I want to be clear about that. I had built something real. I had people who mattered to me, and work that engaged me, and a life that was genuinely mine. The grief never goes away. I don't believe it does for losses like this, but it becomes something you carry differently over time, less like a wound and more like a scar, present always, defining in some ways, but no longer bleeding. By 33, I had been living with the shape of things for a decade, and then my phone rang. It was a Tuesday evening in October. I was making dinner, pasta, nothing elaborate, when my cell phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize, New Jersey area code. I almost didn't answer. I get spam calls from New Jersey numbers occasionally, and I've learned to let them go to voicemail. Something made me pick up. I can't explain it except to say that there are moments where you make a small choice that turns out to be enormous, and you never know which small choices those are until afterward. Is this Marcus Hale? A man's voice, older, slightly raspy, the voice of a former smoker. Who's asking? My name is Dennis Farrow. I was a patrol officer with the Monmouth County Sheriff's Department until 2019. I was one of the first responders at the scene of the accident on Route 9, August 14th, 2014. The pasta water was boiling. I turned off the burner. I remember you from the scene, he said. You were conscious when we arrived, barely, but conscious. You kept asking about your family. He paused. I'm sorry I have to be the one to tell you this. I've been going back and forth about making this call for a long time, but I'm sick, and I just can't take this with me. Take what with you? I said. There were 2 vehicles involved in the accident, he said, not one. I need to explain what I understood about the accident before that phone call. The official account, which I had been given in the hospital, which was confirmed by the police report, which was the account given at trial. A single vehicle, the driver's truck, had run the red light and struck my father's car on the passenger side. The impact had been severe and nearly instantaneous on the passenger side. I had survived because the back seat behind the driver is statistically the most survivable position in a side impact collision. That was the account. 1 drunk driver, 1 vehicle, 1 catastrophic impact. Dennis Farrow told me that was not entirely what he had seen. He told me that when he arrived on scene, there had been evidence of a second vehicle, a dark-colored SUV, that had been present at the intersection, that this vehicle had left before law enforcement arrived, that he had reported it in his initial notes and been told by his supervising sergeant to remove it from the official report, that he had been told the determination had been made that the SUV had not been involved in the collision itself, that it had simply been present, and that including it would complicate the case without adding anything material. He had been 28 years old and 4 years into the job. He had done what he was told. "What's your understanding of what the SUV did?" I asked. My voice was steady. "I don't know how." "I don't know for certain," he said, "but the positioning of your father's vehicle, the angle of impact, the way it had rotated before the collision, it always bothered me. Our accident reconstruction guy at the time said it was consistent with a single impact. I'm not an expert, maybe he was right." Another pause. "But there was a witness, a woman who'd been at a gas station on the corner. She gave a statement to my sergeant that night and it was never included in the file. I don't know what it said, I never saw it." "Do you know her name?" "Patricia Moreau. I've never forgotten it." I did not sleep that night, or the next one. I want to be honest about what those nights were like. For 10 years I had made my peace, not with the loss, never entirely with the loss, but with the story of it. I understood what had happened. I had held a shape in my mind for a decade, a complete shape, terrible but whole. And Dennis Farrow's phone call had reached into that shape and pulled something loose, and now the whole structure was different, and I did not know yet if it was bigger or just broken. I called Dr. Reyes. She had retired from active practice, but we had maintained occasional contact, and she called me back within an hour. We talked for a long time. She said what a good therapist says. She didn't tell me what to do. She helped me understand what I was actually afraid of. And what I was afraid of when I held it up and looked at it directly was not the answer. It was the possibility that the answer would require me to be angry all over again in a way I didn't know if I still had the capacity for. Anger takes energy. The anger I'd had in the early years after the accident, at the driver, at the system that had let him serve 4 years, at a universe that had taken 3 people who deserved enormously better. That anger had been real, and it had been necessary, and it had burned through me, and eventually, through work and time and therapy, it had become something quieter. Starting over was not nothing. But I called a lawyer.
The lawyer's name was Sandra Kim. She specialized in wrongful death cases and had a reputation for taking on cases with complicated investigative components. A friend of mine from college had used her firm and recommended her without hesitation. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "The statute of limitations for wrongful death in New Jersey is 2 years from the date of death. That's long past." I said, "I know. I'm not calling about a lawsuit." She understood. "You want to know what happened." "I want to know what happened." She took the case. Not for litigation purposes. There was nothing to litigate in a traditional sense. But she had investigators, and she had experience with Oprah requests, New Jersey's equivalent to FOIA, and she knew how to pull threads that had been deliberately knotted. It took 4 months. Patricia Morrell was 71 years old and living in Toms River. She had never been contacted after giving her initial statement. She had followed the trial coverage and been confused when the account she'd witnessed didn't match the version being presented, but she had not come forward because no one had asked her, and she was not the kind of person who inserted herself into legal proceedings uninvited. She had assumed she told Sandra's investigator that her statement simply hadn't been considered relevant. Her statement, which she gave again in full, was this. She had been parked at the gas station on the corner filling up her tank when she saw a dark green SUV run the red light from the cross street, not the same direction as the drunk driver's truck, but the intersecting one. The SUV had entered the intersection first, forcing my father's car to swerve. The drunk driver's truck had then struck the car as it was mid-swerve. Patricia Moreau believed, and had always believed, that without the SUV entering the intersection, my father's car would not have been in the path of the truck at the moment of impact. She could not say whether the SUV driver had seen the truck coming. She could not say it was intentional, but she was certain the SUV had been there and had been a factor. She had given a partial plate, 2 letters and a number. It had never been run. Sandra ran it. It took her investigators another 6 weeks to narrow it from a partial, cross-referenced with dark green SUVs registered in central New Jersey in 2014, to a list of 11 vehicles. From 11, they identified 4 that had been in the area. From 4, they found 1 registered to a man named Walter Greer, who had lived 12 miles from the intersection, who had no criminal record, and who had sold the SUV privately 8 months after the accident. Walter Greer had died in 2021. I want to be careful here about what I tell you, because I don't want to overstate what we found. We do not know, will likely never know, whether Walter Greer saw the red light and ran it without seeing my father's car, or ran it recklessly, or made an honest panicked mistake in traffic. We do not know if he knew he had contributed to an accident. We do not know why the sergeant told Dennis Farrow to remove the second vehicle from the report, whether it was genuine negligence, a judgment call that felt justified at the time, or something worse.
The sergeant, a man named Carl Del Vecchio, retired in 2017 and declined to speak to Sandra's investigator. His lawyer sent a letter. What we know is this. The official account of what happened to my family was incomplete. There was a second driver. There was a witness whose statement was buried. And for 10 years, I had held a story with a shape that wasn't entirely its true shape. I sat with that for a long time. Here's what I expected to feel when Sandra laid it all out for me in her office on a gray February afternoon. Rage, the clean, burning, focused kind. An enemy clarified. A new object for 10 years of suppressed fury. Here's what I actually felt. Tired. Enormously, deeply tired. And something that surprised me, which was a strange and specific grief. Not new grief, but the old grief shifting into a new position. The way a familiar ache will sometimes move, and you realized you'd gotten so used to it in one place that you'd forgotten it was something that could move. I drove home from Sandra's office, and I sat in my car in my parking garage for probably 20 minutes, and I talked to my family. I do this sometimes. I know how it sounds, and I don't care. I talked to them. I told them what I'd found out. I told them I was sorry it had taken this long. I told Becca I still thought about her mispronouncing spaghetti, and that I was sorry I'd ever argued with her about anything. Then I went upstairs and I made tea, and I called Dennis Farrow. He picked up on the second ring. I found out what I could find out, I told him. He was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry it wasn't more. It was enough, I said, and I meant it, mostly. How are you doing? He told me about his illness. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3, diagnosed 8 months earlier. He was doing treatment but was realistic. He sounded like a man who had made his decisions about what to say before time ran out. I should have fought harder back then, he said. I've thought about it 1,000 times. I said, you were 28 and following orders. I'm not going to be the one who holds that against you. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. You're a better person than I'd be. I've had a good therapist, I said. I've done a lot of thinking in the months since about what the truth is worth when there's nothing you can do with it. There's no one to prosecute. No civil recourse. Walter Greer is dead. Carl Del Vecchio isn't talking. The drunk driver has served his time and lives somewhere in South Jersey, and I will never seek him out because what would be the point? The machine that failed my family has been idle for a decade, and there is no lever I can pull to make it account for itself in any formal way. And yet, I know more than I did. The shape of that night is more complete. And Patricia Moreau, who carried a silent witness statement inside her for 10 years, she wept when Sandra's investigator came to her door. She said she was so sorry. She said she'd always wondered if she should have pushed harder, called someone, done something. I think about her a lot. The weight of what we carry when we see something and don't know what to do with it. The way a single night, a single intersection, can ripple outward through a decade into the lives of people who are nowhere near the car. I think about Dennis Farrow, calling me from a diagnosis he won't survive, needing to set something down before he couldn't anymore. I think about my father, who was a careful driver, who always signaled his turns, who had a habit of tapping the steering wheel to songs he didn't realize he was humming. He couldn't have known what was coming. He had no time. He was just driving his family home on a Thursday night in August. Dennis Farrow died in March. Sandra's assistant called to let me know. He'd listed me in some paperwork as a contact, which I found out about only then. I went to his service. His daughter shook my hand and said her father had spoken about me. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said he had done a good thing, and that it had mattered. I'm still in Philadelphia, still in logistics, though I've moved up enough that the work interesting than it used to be. I have a person in my life now. His name is James. We've been together 8 months, and he is the first person I've been with who I've told all of this to from the beginning, unedited. It turns out the right person doesn't run from the weight of you. The right person just adjusts their grip. I still talk to my family sometimes. I told them about James. I told them I thought they'd like him. I think my sister would have had opinions about him, would have asked him pointed questions over dinner just to see how he handled it. He would have handled it fine. He handles things fine. I am the last library. That hasn't changed and won't. But I understand now, better than I did, that being the last library is not only a loss. It is also a responsibility, a keeping. Every time I remember my father tapping the steering wheel, or Becca arguing passionately about something that seemed trivial, and was somehow everything, that is an act of preservation. They exist because I remember them, and I intend to keep remembering them for a very long time. That is what I have. That is what no intersection, no buried report, no incomplete truth can take from me. I remember them, and I'm still here. For Richard, Carol, and Becca, and for everyone still standing at the last library, keeping the lights on.